afternoon. This phone thing was made up, but I think it's a message that I was trying to send, how ethical it was for me to keep waiting so many people. And if I add up all of your time with your salaries today, I've already made a damage to the economy of a certain amount of money because I was just trying to waste time on managing my devices. So I thought I'd speak a little bit about ethics of the digital world, ethics of the digital lifestyle. But to be honest, I mean, the conferences that are usually organized by universities are so difficult to handle because so much brain power speaks about so much smart stuff. I've got nothing to say. It only reminds me of a small joke, is that a guy was at the market and calling for everyone. He said, I've got something to say. Everybody gets together. He said, do you know? They said, no. He said, well, if you don't know, I have nothing to tell you because you will never know. The next day he calls the same audience. He says, do you know people get smart, right? Artificial intelligence. They said, yes, we know. He said, well, if you know, what should I tell you? Then the third day he says, people, I've got something to say. So people smart, artificial intelligence, half of the people say, yes, we know, and half of the people say, we don't. He says, well, those who know should tell those who don't know, I've got nothing to say. So probably there's a lot been said, but I'll try to add my perspective as to coming mainly from telecom area, and my perspective on telecom is more related to the communications and telecommunications, but as you know, technology is much broader term. I think in the new, very exciting journey of digital life, there is definitely a reservation as to are we leaving some gaps behind. I think there's a recent speech of His Highness the Aga Khan at, it's not recent, 2014, I think at Brown University, is that are we getting too excited and are we abusing or using in the right context the technology that is at our hand? And I think it all relates to how ethical are we about all these developments. And people tend to get overexcited. And today, when you take a snapshot of the society, this is how the society looks. People are with their phones, people get together, friends get together, but they're really in their phones. I mean, you sit with their friends, they say hi, and then they actually Instagram you that I'm sitting next to you. Or you go to your family and says, Mom, happy birthday. Well, why don't you just say it to my face? So this is literally how the society looks like. And it's, as I said in the beginning of my speech, I think it's somewhat rude to one another. I think technology shouldn't undermine the human values. So what I've done, actually, I've changed my presentation overnight. I'll be honest, it was a different presentation, but what I've picked up on the words that were most commonly used in the last two days, and I consider them a hype. And I think they're definitely hype. There was a notion of virtual reality. I think we are definitely becoming very virtual. I think we are going into what I call is a second layer of life, third layer of life, maybe because sometimes we are so insecure that we can't sustain the current life. We're too scared to leave the current life. So we're actually going into a virtual life where we're more braver, where we can easily talk to girls for the youngsters, where we can negotiate better deal, but we're actually going deeper and deeper in the virtual life. So how good is a virtual life? Yes, this life may be much more beautiful. It may be a very fantastic world with some new voices, new colors, things that we may not never see ever in our life. This is another world where we are very futuristic about, where we are not we're living in a fantasy world. But this is a picture of Kyrgyzstan as of today. And you can see the difference. I think we are now getting away from something which is naturally built in us. So if I had a choice between the two worlds, I think I would still choose the third one. So the virtual world is a notion where we are trying to maybe hide. The other thing which I wanted to highlight is, as I said, it's the second and third life, and it's all about identity crisis. By just standing here for a few seconds, doing nothing but doing my gadgets for the sake of the show, you all already generated a lot of information. It was emotions. We think that emotions are not transferable in the digital world. today they are, because all the smileys and memes and stuff is actually transferring our emotions. However quantifiable it may be, these smileys talk about our moods. Today, I can easily look at the heat map of the world and I know which part of the world is not happy. I can put a system in my company, I already know what's the mood of my system. This gadget tells me every day, your mood score is 76. I don't know what that means. But the scary part is that it's actually sometimes right, that my fitness is bad, I haven't slept well, I'm jet lagged. So, I mean, it knows more about me than I do about myself. And as I said, one of my major issues that we are trying to behind all of these virtual layers in this society where we're becoming braver and braver as we go. There was a project called Second Life, which is called a game, but I have seen people wanting to have wings when they are in there. I've seen people who can dance in that world, which means their aspirations are there, their wheels are there, but in the current world, they're too scared to be themselves. So they go behind all of these identities. I think this whole selfie mania is becoming really an issue in the ethical world. You see people taking photos with the food and with their pets and with this and that, and I think we're really losing touch, although we call it let's keep in touch. So I think when you talk about lycomania, I have seen youth becoming really aggravated for somebody not putting a like on them. That's what they call as a social capital. In our world, we try to get some pennies to get ice cream for a girl we like, or flowers for a girl we like. But today, it's all about who is going to like my picture. And if I don't, people get upset. So we're talking about lycomania. I think it's becoming a real social phobia. It's becoming really an addiction. And as I said, it's still an identity crisis. We are going behind all of these little smileys to hide our identities. I will talk about a little bit about superhuman. And we are becoming superhuman. And we don't. Usually, in the conventional word, we claim to have 5 senses. But we also know that the world around us has many other senses. It's infrared, it's GPS, it's beaming, it's everything. I was looking at a TEDx speech not long ago where a company was raising fund for new implants in the person's body that he can see more than the usual senses. He can see in infrared. He can see some other touches. They claim that the human brain has more capacity to absorb information. It's just that our touch points are naturally less. So if you start to put implants in us, we can see like a snake, we can hear we can smell maybe like a dog, and that's what we are becoming a superhuman. Also, we have, between us, today you understand me because I have one language. English is not my language, but because I speak it, everybody understands me. So language was a medium for people to understand, including animals to understand one another. The other concept is about projections. How am I projecting my life? If I had an interesting case in a small gathering with my friends, 3 people were taking photo of another friend who was dancing. So 2 were taking from the front, he was looking like a dancing. The third one looking from him, from the angle he took, this guy was looking more like a drunk than he was dancing, because it was the projection of the person with his background that completely demised him as a good person. But he was purely dancing, but the picture showed as if he's falling, he's not. That went into the social network saying that, oh, Mr. So-so has been drunk last night, which he was not. So the whole issue of projection is also becoming another reality in the social media as to we want to take picture the way we want it. We want to project it the way we want it. It's not necessarily what it means to be. So I'll come back to the superhuman, but now let's talk about the digital life. I think digital life more or less reflects what we call a super brain today. When you really look at a simple topography of the internet today, it's computers talking to routers, routers talking to servers, servers talking to one another, and it's now coming back. what a message that maybe 10 years ago was taking, or maybe 20 years ago was taking a week or a month to achieve, it takes a second. Anything happened in Iran and US, they will know it instantaneously. And the reaction, even from nobody doing anything in Iran, is gigantic. So when you look at the archaeology of today's world, that's the simple way. The picture on the left is basically a zoom of the neurons of human being. The one on the right is a Twitter messaging around the world at a peak time. You can see the similarities, right? The way the information is flowing is affecting more like a human brain, and it's becoming closer. And as was mentioned in the earlier, why would you want to connect your fridge? You know, maybe we're trying to please the wife, but if you get the milk 2 seconds later, it might create an issue. But I'm being ironic. Everything is now connected. Everything is sending information about us. So I've also heard a word like cloud and big data. How big is big data? As I said earlier in my presentation, even when you are quiet for 1 minute, the audience is generating data through smileys, WhatsApp, everything. So being silent doesn't mean information is not being generated. And that's why it's so big. And behind all of this is this notion of artificial intelligence, which is taking all the information on board, and we don't know how it's being processed. I have recently bought a little robot with a very tiny memory that has artificial intelligence, and it's scary. That little machine is becoming smarter by the day. And I ironically joke with some of my heads of departments. I said, you know, he's taking over your job. You better wake up. So, and that thing on my table is actually becoming smarter. He's recognizing people. He's writing his own algorithm. He doesn't fall from the table. And that's tiny little thing, which is a toy, but it's already quite scary. And then at the back of all of this, there's a notion of machine learning. And I do believe that machines are learning, and I do believe that machines are learning much faster. And I do believe that machines are learning the way they want to learn, because the world is becoming so connected. We have no or less control of how things are designed. And I think the esteemed previous speaker just mentioned that the hardware is out of control. It's so fragile, we don't know. But machines are learning, and the feedback, as I said about my tracker, it tells me more about me than maybe the doctor or my wife or my friends would ever tell. And it's also scary. So are we really talking about competition between robots and humans? Are they coming back? We have seen movies that they all of a sudden return back and they started to take, I wouldn't say they take over our job, but definitely they're becoming more competitive to deal with the humans. But I certainly believe, because my time is short, but I certainly believe that machine can do the work of many ordinary men, but it will still not do the job of an extraordinary man. Behind all the machine, behind all the design of the machine and architecture is still a human being. And if that human being lacks ethics and morale, I think that's where the danger is. So you need to design every architecture of the network with ethics, ethics being in the heart of it. Otherwise, any design works, but it can be used or misused for a different purpose. In the past, this is how we generated data. It took ages to write a book, and those books are still wonderful, they smell good, but today, this is what's happening. We are generating information for no reason, for any reason, and as I said earlier, I'll repeat myself, information is also now emotions. We thought we will never quantify emotions, but in the digital world, emotions are becoming quantifiable, and they're taking a lot of space. So this trend of data is growing so fast. The question to ourselves, and in fact in my company, we have devised a structure or a department called BMI, Business and Market Intelligence. And every time, I said every information has to go to that department. Every time somebody asks for information, I said, you need to ask them 3 times, why do you need this information? Because the minute you generate information, it has all the attributes attached to it. Security, leak of information, qualification, verification, and you have to invest so much money into just one letter being generated. So BMI department is in the business of not creating information, whereas it seems to be a conflict. But don't generate information unless you really have to do, and give it in the good hands, because even doing the analysis of my business, it can go very wrong if the data is misinterpreted. So I think I will reiterate on something that His Highness the Aga Khan also said at the stage, is that it is becoming so beautiful and convenient that the world is in a small screen. You don't have to look around for information, it's all in your screen. But the reality may be further and further away. As I said, you're literally digging yourself into something far too virtual. So my message in the ethics, a general message, is that when you communicate, communicate responsibly. Because I think the flow of information, the flow of data, and in today's world we are trying to blame big companies that they're misusing our privacy. I think we have to be very responsible for generating any kind of information about ourselves and others. So in my opinion, the prerequisites for an ethical digital culture, or what I call is code of conduct, before all the rules are in place, before all the institutions are in place, before we really get the ethics of digital life, what is really right and what is really wrong in the digital world, to me these are the 5 prerequisites, is that a contract is as good as a person who signs it, which means when you do a deal in the digital world, you need to know who is behind this, who is the person responsible for this, whether it's company-wide, especially US Bank. Are we delegating decision-making to a computer? I think for quite a lot of parts, we are trying to delegate our decision-making to computers. At the heart of it, it still has to be human. I think we've spoken about privacy and security. I'm not going to elaborate on that. But most importantly, in all of the digital life, trust, just like in any other any life, trust is the primary qualification of any digital systems. Your employees, everybody needs to trust your system, whether it's digital trust or whatever trust, but trust should be at the core of the design. We should always allow for bias. I gave you an example of how people project the reality. They take a picture from a different angle and the reality changes. That's what I call as bias. I think also not having the personal contact with the person, there is always a very high probability of bias towards the reality. So bias will exist and it will improve as we depart from the engagement. And then accountability. I think we had spoken about the new laws in EU, and so I'm not going to elaborate on accountability. But for me, the best technology is still a human brain. It's the most intelligent technology ever made available to humanity. And I think we should make use of it. And it's not artificial, by the way. And I believe my message is technology should be designed to service humanity. It shouldn't compete or otherwise replace the coexisting of human, particularly human values. It can never compete and replace. So in the end, for me, being in touch means this. It doesn't mean that you're on Facebook with your friends. I had 600 people friends in my Facebook. I have no idea how I made 600 friends, but physically it's impossible to have that kind of friend, at least to be engaged with them. I have closed my account and I have 6 friends that I stay with every week, and I'm really happy. So how do you really entertain 600, 1,000 friends on social media? I have no clue. Maybe there's a technology. But for me, being in touch is this. And for me, superhuman is this. When you go home, you hug your mother, you hug your kid, and you don't send WhatsApp. You literally go and say hello to your mother, and you sit next to her. And that's what I call as a superhuman. Thank you very much. I'll be back.